Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial as reported by Inner City Press. What? Names did Diddy's former head of security reveal that left the entire courtroom in stunned silence? Why did the judge immediately order a recess after the revelation? And what powerful figures are now scrambling to distance themselves from the music mogul? In a federal courtroom where Sean Diddy Combs faces serious accusations, his former head of security made an unexpected entrance. Not as an ally, not as a friend, but as a witness ready to reveal the dark secrets he was paid to hide. A man who spent over a decade watching, protecting, and as he now admits, covering up incidents that would destroy careers and shatter reputations. The moment he began listing names, you could hear a pin drop. Prosecutors leaned forward. Defense attorneys frantically scribbled notes, and Diddy himself sat motionless. His usual confidence replaced by a cold, calculating stare directed at the man who once pledged his loyalty. This wasn't just testimony. It was a dam breaking after years of mounting pressure. The security chief didn't speak through speculation or rumors. He spoke through first-hand accounts, detailed logs, and evidence he had meticulously documented as insurance throughout his employment. And when he revealed which A-list celebrities, politicians, and business executives he was forced to handle situations for, the courtroom didn't just gasp. It froze in collective shock. This story isn't just about one security chief breaking his silence. It's about the power structures that enable abuse, the loyalty bought through fear and money. In the moment when even the most faithful employee decides that truth matters more than protection. If you find this information valuable, please take a moment to like and subscribe. This helps us continue bringing you the latest developments in this explosive case as they unfold. It started like any other day of the trial. The Manhattan Federal Courthouse buzzed with reporters whispering updates into phones. Legal teams arranged documents at their tables, and the public gallery filled with spectators who had lined up since dawn for a chance to witness the proceedings against one of music's most powerful figures. When the prosecution announced their next witness, Marcus Williams, former head of security for Diddy's Bad Boy Entertainment, few recognized the significance. The man who entered looked nothing like the imposing figure seen hovering in the background of countless paparazzi photos. Gone was the trademark dark suit and earpiece. Instead, Williams walked in wearing a simple navy blazer, his posture rigid, but his eyes revealing the weight of what he was about to share. The judge called the court to order. The prosecution approached Williams with measured steps. "Mr. Williams, how long did you work for the defendant?" 14 years, 7 months, and 22 days, Williams replied, his voice steady. No hesitation, no checking notes. He had counted every day until that moment. Williams had been viewed as fiercely loyal to Diddy. His silence after leaving the organization 3 years ago had been interpreted as professional discretion. But something had changed. Maybe it was the mounting testimony from other witnesses. Maybe it was the threats he later revealed had been made against his family. Maybe it was simply the weight of carrying secrets that had become too heavy. The prosecutor nodded. Then asked the question that would change everything. During your employment, were you ever asked to cover up illegal activities? Williams wasn't there as a celebrity bodyguard. He was there as a man who had seen too much and said too little. And when he began to respond, leaning slightly toward the microphone, the courtroom wasn't prepared for what they would hear. Because what Williams revealed about the parties, the cover-ups, and the names of those involved wasn't just shocking. It was a direct challenge to the power structure of an entire industry. It started like any other job interview. The room buzzed with energy as assistants rushed in and out. Legal pads filled with notes, phones constantly ringing. Williams, with his military background and private security experience, thought he understood what he was walking into. But when Diddy entered the room, the atmosphere changed. Everyone stood straighter, voices lowered. It wasn't just respect. It was something closer to fear. "I need someone who understands discretion," Diddy had told him during that first meeting. Someone who knows that loyalty isn't just about physical protection. Williams told the court how his role expanded beyond traditional security within weeks. First, it was handling overly enthusiastic fans who needed to be quietly removed from hotel rooms. Eventually, it evolved into something much darker. The judge raised an eyebrow as Williams described his first major test of loyalty. A well-known actress, visibly disoriented at an after-party, was being escorted to a private room by two men. When Williams intervened out of concern, Diddy pulled him aside. "She's fine. This isn't your concern," Williams recalled Diddy saying. "Your job is to make sure no one goes down that hallway for the next hour." Williams shifted in the witness chair, his hands clasped tightly together. "I knew something was wrong, but I told myself it wasn't my business." The next day, I was given a $30,000 bonus. He detailed how his security team operated, explaining their communication systems, the code words used for different situations, and how they were instructed to handle problems. "We had categories," Williams explained. Category 1 was basic security, keeping fans and paparazzi at a distance. Category 2 was managing party environments, confiscating phones, managing guest lists, ensuring privacy. Category 3 was what we called situation management. That meant handling anything that could create legal or reputation problems. Williams didn't make eye contact with anyone in the courtroom. He didn't even glance at Diddy. His focus remained on his testimony, as if reciting facts that had been burned into his memory. The first name on the list was Jerome Crawford, Williams stated, referring to a young producer who had threatened to file a lawsuit over stolen music. "My team was instructed to plant drugs in his car and then call in an anonymous tip to police." The courtroom stirred. The prosecutor asked him to continue. Then there was Melissa Chen, the assistant who witnessed an assault at a 2016 party. "We were told to convince her that speaking would end her career. I personally delivered an envelope with photos of her children at school along with a generous consulting fee for her silence." Williams methodically worked through incidents, dates, and names, each one more disturbing than the last. His testimony wasn't filled with emotion or dramatic flair. It was delivered with the precision of someone who had carried these facts like weights for years. "I've served in war zones," Williams said at one point, "but nothing prepared me for the moral compromises I made in that job. I've kept a lot inside for a long time," Williams said, his voice now taking on a deeper resonance. "I've protected celebrities, managed security for events with presidents and royalty, and built a reputation as someone who can handle difficult situations, but none of that excuses what I witnessed and helped conceal." He turned slightly toward Diddy. "You built a system where everyone was compromised." Williams told the courtroom that it started like many Hollywood stories do, with glamour and excitement. The private jets, exclusive parties, and proximity to power were intoxicating. The way they framed it, security wasn't just about physical protection. It was about managing optics and protecting the brand. It sounded legitimate, even necessary in the entertainment world. But the moment Williams realized he had crossed a line came during a weekend event at a Miami property in 2012. The house had multiple security layers. He explained ID verification at the main gate, phone check-in at the door, and specific areas that required additional clearance. The basement level was restricted to only 6 people, including Mr. Combs and myself. Williams described how the basement had been converted into what staff called the viewing room. There were cameras installed throughout the main party areas, hallways, and even in some bedrooms. The official explanation was security monitoring, Williams stated, but the footage was reviewed, selected, and stored in a private server. The second, Williams mentioned the server. Diddy's attorney objected vigorously. The judge overruled after brief consideration. The server contained compromising footage of high-profile individuals, actors, musicians, athletes, politicians. Mr. Combs called it his insurance policy. Williams explained that these recordings weren't just kept for protection. They were actively used for leverage. Williams was instructed to handle distribution of materials to certain individuals before important business meetings or contract negotiations. I would be told to deliver an envelope or flash drive with instructions to make sure the recipient reviewed the contents before their meeting with Mr. Combs. Within days, deals that had been stalled would suddenly be approved. He described how after a 2017 business partner threatened to pull out of a major investment, Williams was instructed to deliver materials to the man's hotel. 3 hours later, the deal was not only back on, but the terms had shifted significantly in Mr. Combs' favor. Williams said that after several years, he began keeping his own records. I was becoming increasingly concerned about my legal exposure. I started documenting incidents, instructions, and maintaining copies of certain materials as protection. Then, Williams delivered the moment that would send shockwaves through the entertainment industry. He began listing names. I was personally instructed to handle situations involving the following individuals, he said, before naming 3 A-list actors. A prominent streaming service executive to major music producers and most shockingly, a high-ranking political figure. The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered his gavel repeatedly. Diddy's attorney was on his feet shouting objections, and Diddy himself, for the first time in the trial, showed visible emotion, a cold, seething anger as he stared unblinking at his former security. "Chief order," the judge demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We will take a 15-minute recess, counsel, in my chambers immediately." When court resumed, Williams continued his testimony with a noticeable security increase in the courtroom. 2 additional marshals now stood by the doors. Williams described how he followed Diddy's instructions to monitor certain individuals at parties, thinking they were going to discuss business opportunities. Instead, what he witnessed shook him to his core. There were rooms in the Los Angeles house that guests were brought to after they'd been drinking or using substances, Williams explained. Some I recognized from the entertainment industry. Some looked disoriented. There were others who seemed to be there specifically to compromise these individuals. Williams paused, swallowing hard. I didn't know how to leave. And that was the point. Once you're in, Williams continued, his voice steady but hollow. A few days after expressing concerns about a particularly troubling incident involving a young actress, he received a call from a blocked number. The voice simply said, "Your mother still lives at 1421 Westbrook Avenue, right? Nice neighborhood. Would be a shame if something happened there." Then they hung up. Williams thought it was just an empty threat until photographs arrived at his apartment showing his mother collecting mail, his sister picking up her children from school, and his girlfriend leaving her workplace. Inside was a handwritten note that read, "The family business stays in the family." I almost didn't look at the photos, but I did. Williams testified. It was surveillance of my family going about their daily lives. I don't remember much from that night, but I remember deciding that my concerns weren't worth risking their safety. Williams testified that the fear he felt in that moment was unlike anything he'd experienced before, even during his military service. I realized I wasn't hired to provide security. I was brought in to be compromised, to be made complicit. That way I could never speak without implicating myself. This pattern of intimidation wasn't just directed at Williams. He described how the security team was structured to ensure everyone had participated in at least one questionable activity. It was deliberate. Everyone had something they could be fired or prosecuted for. Everyone had a reason to stay quiet. Williams described a sophisticated system of monitoring and control. Staff phones were regularly checked. Conversations were recorded. Loyalty was tested through deliberate setups. One day, Williams recounted, I was handed an envelope with $50,000 and told to deliver it to a detective who had been investigating noise complaints at one of the properties. I was being recorded the entire time. It wasn't about the detective. It was about ensuring I could be implicated in bribery if I ever decided to talk. Williams explained that this system created perfect loyalty through mutual assured destruction. Nobody could turn without burning themselves. That was the genius of it, Williams said. That's when the manipulation deepened. I'd get invitations to exclusive industry events. If I seemed hesitant or expressed concerns about recent incidents, suddenly those invitations would disappear. People I'd built professional relationships with stopped returning calls. Rumors started circulating that I was unreliable, that I had substance abuse issues, that I had stolen from previous clients. I knew what it was. It was pressure. Diddy didn't need to make threats directly. He had systems that did it for him. And so for years, Williams said nothing. He continued providing security, managing situations, and building walls around his conscience. But every time another story broke about someone speaking out like Cassie Ventura, I thought, if they can speak up, why am I still quiet? He looked around the courtroom. Diddy didn't just ruin people's careers. He made them fear telling the truth. And that, Williams said, was what finally brought me to court. Williams paused, glanced at the jury, and leaned closer to the microphone. It wasn't just about the individuals who were directly harmed. That was devastating enough. But this was bigger than isolated incidents. He explained that calls would come through Diddy's chief of staff, requirements and demands that crossed every professional and moral boundary. When Williams occasionally pushed back, the consequences were swift. I'd express concerns about handling a particular situation, and the next week I'd find my security, team budget cut, or key staff reassigned. Williams described how this wasn't occasional, but systematic. Diddy didn't have to threaten people directly. He had networks of lawyers, publicists, industry executives, and yes, security personnel who understood what needed to be done without explicit instructions. He knew who to call. He knew how to make problems disappear and how to create problems for anyone who considered speaking out. The breaking point came after a 2020 party where Williams witnessed something that crossed his final moral line. There was a young singer, couldn't have been more than 20 years old. She was being pursued for a contract with Bad Boy Records. After she was brought to a private area of the house, I heard screaming. When I entered the room, what I saw, Williams stopped, composing himself. I intervened. He continued, and for the first time, I directly refused an order from Mr. Combs. He looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before and said, "You work for me, not for her." That's when I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Williams submitted his resignation. The following day, within hours, he received a visit from Diddy's legal team with a severance agreement that included an extremely restrictive NDA and a $2 million payment. I signed it, Williams admitted. I took the money. I told myself it was compensation for years of service. But I knew what it really was. It was payment for my silence. For 3 years, Williams remained quiet, watching from the sidelines as allegations against Diddy began to surface. Then the FBI contacted me. They already had testimonies from other staff members. They already knew about incidents I thought were completely hidden. That's when I realized that no amount of money was worth protecting what I had been part of. Williams' voice dropped to a quieter, deeper tone. I stayed quiet for 3 years. I convinced myself that speaking would put my family at risk. But then the federal investigation began gathering momentum. He said the first time he heard about the FBI interviewing former staff members, he didn't believe it. Then I got a call, not from Diddy's team, but from a former colleague who had already been questioned. They said, "Marcus, they know about Miami. They know about the server. People are talking." Williams described feeling like the floor had dropped from under him. I didn't even know how much evidence existed, but once I accepted that others were coming forward, everything started to connect. Williams said he stayed up all night replaying memories, the parties, the covered-up incidents, the threats, the payoffs. It was all a system, and I was a key operator within it. He said the breaking point wasn't fear, it was shame. I realized that if I didn't speak now, my silence would become my legacy. I have nieces and nephews who look up to me. What would they think when all of this eventually came out? Because secrets like these always surface eventually, Williams told the court. He contacted federal prosecutors himself. I called them and said, I'm ready. Whatever questions you have, I'll answer them. Looking directly at the jury, Williams delivered the most powerful moment of his testimony. I wasn't just a security chief. I was a fixer. I was a threat enforcer. I was paid to make problems disappear. Then he looked at Diddy again, this time with unwavering conviction. And you knew exactly what you were doing when you brought me into the system. Williams described how the operation extended far beyond typical celebrity protection. This wasn't about keeping overzealous fans away or managing paparazzi. This was about creating an environment where certain individuals could engage in behavior that would destroy their careers and possibly result in criminal charges if it ever came to light. He detailed how different properties were used for different purposes. The Miami house was for blackmail material. The New York apartment was for business negotiations that needed extra persuasion. The LA compound was where people were brought when they needed to be reminded of their place in the hierarchy. Williams testified that Diddy personally oversaw the most sensitive operations. He would review security footage weekly. He kept files on people, their weaknesses, their pressure points, who they cared about. It wasn't just about protecting himself. It was about having leverage over everyone in his orbit. When asked by prosecutors why he was coming forward now, knowing he might face charges himself, Williams replied simply, because power without accountability corrupts everything it touches. And I helped build that system of power. When Marcus Williams stepped down from the witness stand, he didn't look like someone who had won anything. He looked like someone who had finally put down a crushing weight. The courtroom remained tense, almost unsure how to process what they had heard. Even the judge appeared shaken. Some of the jurors had tears in their eyes, and Diddy, for the first time in the entire trial, looked genuinely concerned. Williams didn't speak to the press when he exited. He didn't wave, didn't make statements. He walked out the front of the courthouse with his head held high, but his shoulders carried the weight of 14 years of compromised morals. When asked later by reporters if he felt relieved, Williams reportedly responded, "There's no relief. In admitting you helped hurt people, there's only the beginning of making amends." But outside the courtroom, the world was only beginning to react. The entertainment industry went into crisis mode. Publicists for the named celebrities called emergency meetings. Studios paused productions involving the implicated actors. Record labels issued carefully worded statements, expressing shock and concern while distancing themselves from any connection to Diddy's operations. Behind closed doors, crisis teams activated across Los Angeles and New York. PR firms sent internal memos urging clients to review any past associations with Diddy or attendance at his events. And while many tried to pretend they were shocked, social media was already connecting dots that had been visible for years. Screenshots of old party photos resurfaced. Past interviews where celebrities nervously changed the subject when asked about Diddy's parties suddenly gained new context. And most painfully, previous accusations that had been dismissed or settled quietly were being re-examined through a new lens. Fans weren't just shocked. They were furious. Furious that vulnerable people had been exploited. Furious that for years, these stories had been dismissed as industry rumors. And furious that a system of enablers had protected the powerful at the expense of victims. The federal prosecutor announced that based on Williams' testimony, they would be pursuing additional charges and investigating several more individuals. 3 of the celebrities named had already contacted authorities through their attorneys to negotiate cooperation agreements. Williams himself faced an uncertain future. Despite cooperation agreements, he would likely face charges for his role in the operation. But as one legal analyst noted, his testimony broke the dam. Now the flood of truth can't be stopped. The era of silence was finally over. This case continues to develop with new revelations emerging daily. If you found this report informative, please like and subscribe for continuing coverage of this unprecedented case that's shaking the foundations of the entertainment industry. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light and hold power accountable.